I am very honored to address you this evening. I will have a little bit of difficulty in projecting. I'm therefore going to keep this microphone close to my larynx, which is a little bit on the hoarse side. Arnie, if you could click the first button. I received this in the mail just a couple of days ago, and if you read it, the bottom of it is actually signed by Ellen Levine. And Ellen is the person who just spoke to you. And if you click it one more time, you'll see it says, people often say they can't imagine doing the work that I do as an oncology social worker. But I say to them and to all of you that I love my work and have gained much wisdom and humility from my conversations with so many of you over the years. You've taught me so much about what's important to me. Well, she's retiring in about 2 or 3 weeks. And so the next button, Arnie, shows you that she wears many hats, as in the upper left, upper right on the bottom, so beautifully dressed. And we got her a plant. I don't believe in flowers, really. Flowers are pulled from the earth. And I believe in things that live, that are planted, like you, in the ground, and can continue life. So this is a lily. It's just about to bloom. It's got, I think, 1 bloom on it so far.
Very thoughtful. Very thoughtful. Thank you so much.
The next slide. This says, unfortunately, there's no cure. There's not even a race for the cure. Well, as you know, many of us race in different ways. Some of us race to a lecture. Some of us, including a rabbi who's here tonight, races half marathons and 5Ks regularly. And these are oftentimes for the purpose of generating interest and funds to support research, often for cancer, sometimes for many other processes. Multiple sclerosis, cystic fibrosis, childhood deformities, many, many different reasons. But in cancer care, there are innumerable numbers of programs that are available now to participate in. There's research in every field. Next. The top number, 1,685,000, are the number of people who will develop cancer this year in the United States. And the next number, 595,690, are the number of people who would die. Now, when I was growing up, I was taught that 1/2 of people, adults, would at some time in their life develop cancer. And 2/3 of them would die of it. Well, now, it's still about true that about 1/2 of us will develop cancer, but only 1/3 of us will die from it. And this number of 595 is virtually 1 million fewer than the number above, indicating that there's another 1 million survivors each year, people who have overcome cancer. Right now, there are actually 5 million 20-year survivors of cancer in the United States alone, which is truly remarkable and didn't take place when I was growing up. When I was growing up, do you know that it was more common for people not to be informed about cancer? My father was in the clothing business. He had a tailor working for him, Mary Russo. And I remember her going away one day to have a breast removed, something we infrequently do now. Going away for a breast removed in those days was such that even surviving the operation was held in doubt. She survived the operation. Since 1991, there's been a 23% decline in the death rate from cancer, and there's 1.7 million extra lives, extra people alive because of that decline, Arnie. On the left are the death rates that you can see are dropping quite precipitously since around 1991 for all cancers. And here, there's 1.2 more million men surviving because of that decline. And on the next slide, there's the same status for women, but women have a lower incidence of cancer to start with, therefore a lower death rate, and by and large, women are much healthier than men. We've saved many more women as well, so there's another 500,000 women who are surviving since 1991 because of being cured of malignancies. And that 1.2 million men and 0.5 million women adds up to that 1.7 million extra people who are alive who otherwise would not have been had the improvements in cancer survival not been made over the last 25 years, which spans my career. Next. Now, everybody can identify this person. Earlier in his career, he got the Nobel Prize in 1904. At any rate, I am convinced that God does not play dice. One of his favorite sayings, there's a dice up in the left-hand corner. Many people would say that the discovery of black holes now indicates that God does play dice, but that's far beyond my capacity. The next slide shows someone very dear to my heart, whose hallways I walked in at Johns Hopkins for many years. Medicine is a science of uncertainty, but an art of probability. Now, Osler made many aphorisms in the 1880s. He was the chairman of medicine from 1889 to 1904, and taught us, among many things, that it is more important to know what kind of illness or disease a person has, what kind of person has a disease, rather than what kind of disease a person has. It's more important to know the person, the individual, their background, what they did for a living, what they do for a living, what their family history is, than anything about the individual disease. The patient teaches us the disease every time. And every person that I meet as a patient teaches me. And those of you who know me know that I get involved in your lives, in your backgrounds, and in your families, because I will learn far much more about you and about the illness, and how to defeat that illness with you on my side and me on your side as we move ahead together. Next. At Columbia, Stuart Firestein, who in the 1970s was a liberal arts major and then went to San Francisco to put on plays, ultimately was told that, you'd be pretty good if you went to college. So he went to college. And then when he graduated college at Columbia, he said, you'd be good if you went to graduate school and became a physician. He went to graduate school and became a physician and ultimately became the head of the Department of Neurosciences at Columbia. In the last 3 years, he's come out with 2 great books, Ignorance and Failure. They're on my bedside. I fail every day and I'm ignorant every day, and the more ignorant I know that I am, the more I'll learn. But one of the things that captured me in his book on ignorance, in the introduction, he said, I've often wondered what the parents of my students think when their students bring home in their report card and they get a A in a course called ignorance. And that got me. And there's many other enticing comments in his wonderful books. But recently he stated, it is a mistake to think that any published paper is the end of the story and a statement of incontrovertible truth. Instead, it is a progress report. Anything that you hear on the evening news or read in the New York Times or other scientific publications, some of you prescribe to Nature or Science or other journals. All of these things are checkpoints. They're not the final answer. That's what's so interesting about being ignorant and failing. That is what drives science. Failure, inquiry, find out what's behind the lines. Really, what is the truth? Asking the right questions. Getting a negative response changes the question. It changes the background, and you drive ahead further. It's okay to fail. Next. Science is not at a standstill. Parking for drive-through service only. Of course, this would have to be in a McDonald's, right? Next. And the directions are always misleading. Look at this. I found this as I was getting ticketed in Heightstown. I wasn't even speeding. I was making a wrong turn. I was just following directions. Next. Well, the cell cycle is really what drives medical oncology. The cell cycle really is a statement of how cells grow. Every cell in your body grows. Every cell in my body grows. Cells that have been injured grow more quickly because they repair. If you have hot chicken soup and you scald the top of your mouth, it's going to grow back. If you get a viral gastroenteritis, you're going to be sick for a while. And then the diarrhea stops because it's healing. The same thing with a sunburn. Ultimately, it peels and heals because the skin is turning over, the mouth is turning over, the bowel is turning over. Normal cells grow and divide and repair normally. Abnormal cells do not. Cancer cells do not. There are certain growth signals, certain halt signals, and certain repair signals that are in every cell of our body. Next. Oncogenes are cells, notice the green, that give a go-ahead signal. Go more quickly. The next are tumor suppressor genes that give a stop sign, telling you to slow down or stop completely in your tracks. These things are very much like driving. I remember a few years ago I was driving on the turnpike, and it brought to mind a man who was speeding. And he was speeding 75 miles per hour going north, and a policeman notes this and drives up to him along the left side. The guy picks it up to 90 miles an hour, and the guy floors it, takes it up to 100 miles per hour. Policeman takes it up to 100, pulls him over. Guy comes to a standstill, rolls down his window. Policeman walks over truculently to the speeder. He says, "Mister," he said, "you better come up with a darn good reason for speeding. You threaten not only your life, but mine and other passengers, other people on the turnpike. You better come up with a good reason, or you're going to jail." He said, "Well, officer," he said, "my wife ran off with a police officer just a few years ago, and I was afraid you were bringing her back." So there are various things that make you put your foot on the pedal and speed up. There are other things that make it slow down. Every cell, every normal cell in our body is subject to those same signals. Next. And on the left, you can see there's even repairs ahead. Just like driving, there are repair genes. In our body, there are genes that turn on growth. There are genes that slow them down. There are genes that repair them, and they work in synchrony with one another. They have to. But you know, life is a long-distance ride. We all know that if we drove from here home, we have a pretty small likelihood of getting in an accident. But if you drive from here to California, with all the stop signs and speeding and all the changes, it's a longer ride. You've got a longer likelihood of getting into an accident and having something wrong with an oncogene, or something wrong with a tumor suppressor gene, or even something wrong with a repair gene. Next. But really, the whole message is one cell always becomes two. This is division. And they're subject to the cell cycle control mechanisms that I showed here. Next. In order to develop a cancer, there is usually an overgrowth of cells. After all, a cancer or a tumor or a growth or a swelling are various synonyms for the same thing. Now, some of your doctors might use the word swelling or growth because they're coating it over or sugar-coating it. But it's probably better to get at the bottom line and get it out in the open, because most people can be saved in this day, and it's important to base your hope in reality. Normal homeostasis means that the number of cells that are being created are equaled by the number of cells that are lost. A baby is born. What's the first thing a baby does? Has a bowel movement, meconium. They didn't eat anything. What's coming out? It's the cells that really canalize the mouth, the stomach, the small bowel, and the large bowel. Those cells break down, and they're passed. That's equilibrium. You make cells, you lose cells. Tanning, you make cells and you peel. Same thing. But if those mechanisms that I showed are not in synchrony, more cells are made. This line is thick. Then there are cells that are lost. And so a tumor develops. More cells in the large yellow box form. Next. There are occasions where the number of cells made in a cancer are the same number of cells made normally. But there are fewer cells that are lost. That can be seen in certain lymphomas. That can be seen frequently in thyroid cancer. and certain skin cancers. But the main mechanism is this one. More cells are produced than are lost. Next. Because life is a long journey, because there are many mutations and events that can take place in the oncogenes, in the suppressor genes, in the repair genes, multiple crashes may occur. Any number of events may take place in these genes that make a green light go on and never turn off, that make a red light fail to turn on, and that prevent normal repair to take place. Next. And this crash is what we call a cancer. There are many signals and events that take place that are so-called hallmarks of cancer. And a few years ago, Harahan and Weinberg at the Whitehead Institute in Boston came up with these various events that need to take place, which are the hallmarks of cancer. This is the strategy by which cancers form and by which the growths develop. Next. On the left are the normal cells. What happens with normal cells? If you put a cell in a dish, it'll grow, but it won't pile up. It'll grow to the edge of the dish and then stop. If it doesn't get enough oxygen, it'll die. If it doesn't get enough nourishment in the form of amino acids and sugar, it'll die. But in the red, cancer cells are very different. They'll grow to the edge, they'll spread quickly, they will pile up, they will become immortal. Some of you may have read The Immortal Life of, right? A beautiful story from Johns Hopkins itself, in which one of the heroes was Victor McCusick, who revealed the fact that the cells from the cervical cancer were in fact being cultured and sent all over the world. They were immortal. Those cells date to 1951, 65 years ago. Rejuvenation. Well, we would all like to be rejuvenated, but certain things that rejuvenate may also cause malignancies. There's been work done by a nearby pharmaceutical company looking at a drug that will rejuvenate the hair follicles in bald men. Who here would want that? But when it's done, it can cause bowel cancer. It's called a beta-catenin stimulator. So one has to be very cautious. There are untold negatives that we would not want to unleash. It can be a Pandora's box. The cells divide, and they can divide numerous times. Most cells may divide 40 or 60 times and then age. Some of us may have heard of the phrase, something called telomeres. And telomeres are at the end of DNA, and they rejuvenate DNA through an enzyme called telomerase. When that happens, the ends of the DNA are rejuvenated and stay healthy for more divisions. But as normal cells age, the telomerase breaks down and the cells stop dividing. Not so in cancer cells. Cancer cells can divide because they can be immortal. They may escape immune control. Now, many of you have heard about newer drugs that are out that are stimulating the immune system. It's a major breakthrough. There are studies going on now in all of the 273 cancers that exist, because there's reason to believe that every cancer may come under control by immune stimulation, using our own immunity. The drugs that are being used are not immune drugs per se. They're drugs that take the brakes off of our own immune system, hyping up our own immune system to attack the cancer. And finally, the cells may forget how to die. And I remember a lady I took care of, 106 years old. She's the oldest lady I ever took care of who needed chemotherapy because she had Hodgkin's disease and needed chemotherapy. And she was in good shape. But she was the last surviving member of her family other than grandnieces and grandnephews. And she said, you know, God forgot me. I thought that was a very poignant statement at 106. But cancer cells forget how to die. Next. Now, in just a few weeks, the 63rd anniversary of the discovery of the structure of DNA will be reported, will take place. And Watson on the left and Crick on the right Watson is still alive, but senile and a bigot that everybody knows about now. Got the Nobel Prize too long ago. He got it in 1961. How many Nobel laureates live 55 years after you get the Nobel Prize? It doesn't happen. It might be 5 years, it might be 20 years. You have to be alive, of course, to get the Nobel Prize, but he's still with us. The structure on the right was actually a diagram made by Crick's wife, Odile Crick, and actually a cartoon of a letter that Crick wrote to his granddaughter when she was 10 in 1953 is available for, I could have shown it here, was in the New York Times 3 years ago. It's a very beautiful letter in which he revealed the structure to his 10-year-old granddaughter in words that she understood. And that's why he got the Nobel Prize. Simplicity. I was told many times, I guess the phrase is, make it simple, stupid. And people tell me, Mike, always make it simple if you can. Next slide. But that's a beautiful kind of thing. So here's the DNA double helix in a cartoon. And there's various nucleotides that match and make this beautiful, iconic image for us to look at. Next slide shows that every once in a while, an event takes place that damages one of those base pairs. It damages it. And when it damages it, that damage may be in one of the genes that is in the green light district, which is the oncogene, or if you come from Belgium or from Holland, the red light district. I'm not getting it. The red light district, which tells the cells normally to stop, but they don't, or it can even be in the repair gene district in which the cells cannot be repaired. But once a mutation takes place, these cancer cells can take off. Next. So on the left, when a normal DNA molecule is working, it will make a protein. And a protein may be this long. Some of these proteins are responsible for telling us what color our hair or skin is. Some of these proteins may tell us how thick and strong our bones will be. Others of these will be functional. They will tell us how much alcohol we can consume before we otherwise would be picked up by a police officer while driving. They might tell us how much marijuana we can smoke before we get high. They might say, how much wine can you drink before you get stoned during a Passover Seder? There's multiple things. All of those are functional genes. So we have structural genes and functional genes. But when there's a mutation that takes place, instead of the protein being this long, it's only this long, and it cannot carry out its normal function, which is on the right. And that is why there are abnormalities in the green light district in the oncogenes, the red light district in Holland, and the repair genes that we are always passing in New York City. Next. So this is what happens. This is the cell cycle. And these have to be coordinated. They work in tandem and they work together in a very carefully coordinated manner. If the oncogenes are mutant, you get a cancer because too many cells are made. If the tumor suppressor genes are mutant, the cells forget how to die, and they again pile up and make a cancer. If the repair genes are mutant, the cell cycle turns over too quickly, and you get too many cells. Next. So survival of the fittest is absolutely critical. Notice this is a Vic Tanny's. Notice it's a fitness center. What do you see here? I thought this is absolutely terrific. They're all taking the escalator. Nobody is taking the steps, which really gets me. I will tell you, I never take an elevator at Robert Wood, which is 9 stories. I don't take it. I will not do it. And now they've got us parking 3 stories lower than the hospital. So we've got 12 stories to walk. But it's very good for fitness. Now, it turns out, who is it who stated survival of the fittest? What scientist? Who wants to tell me the truth? I will give you whatever I've got in my wallet. It's not Darwin. It's not Darwin. So Darwin's phrase was descent with modification. 1859, and that was origin of species. Descent with modification. Instead, it was a polymath in 1890 whose name was Herbert Spencer, who came up with the phrase survival of the fittest, which everybody remembers but attributes to the wrong person. And you can look that up on Wiki if you want to. And then, if I'm wrong, you got my wallet. Next slide. Well, these are different ways that DNA can get damaged. And I won't go into it, except to tell you that on the next slide, these men got Nobel Prizes in the fall of 2015 for discovering the repair gene pathways that fix the oncogenes, that fix the suppressor oncogenes, that fix the repair genes. All of these are critical, and they have to be in a coordinated fashion. One was in Belgium, one was in Norway, one in the United States. 3 were recognized for these major breakthroughs. That's how important it is. Next. Tumor evolution is simply here. On the left, we see a cell, and it can divide, and notice it's darker yellow or a little orange or red. It's acquiring, the different colors are there to signify that the cells are acquiring new characteristics. Maybe they learn how to grow quicker. Maybe they learn how to grow without oxygen or with less food. Maybe they learn how to travel to the brain or liver or bone. Maybe they learn how to escape treatment in some manner. But as you can see, as they go from left to right, the colors change, and those colors mean new features, new characteristics. They are evolving, just like species evolve. Next. Humans evolve. On the left, we've seen these iconic figures plenty of times, and the next slide shows you that we evolve not just to carry a pitchfork or a flute, but notice we're carrying a bag and an iPhone. So we can evolve beyond, and of course iPhones may be the beginning of the descent of man, because as you know, doing a selfie is a major cause of death right now. And we know that people walking are not paying attention to intersections, and we've got to be even more careful. So it may be the beginning of the descent. But there's other forms of evolution as shown on the next. And we see Mickey Mouse, 1927 to now it's 90 years. Next shows the modern Mickey. Look how he's changed. The sharp nose, the skinny limbs. This is called neoteny. And the next slide shows the real evolution of Mickey over this period of time. From, what was he called? Steamboat Willie to modern Mickey. And notice he's thicker, he's fatter, he's more lovable, he's more huggable. These things change, mainly because we can sell it easier, I suppose, and our kids love it. The next is a very common evolution as well. On the left is the very first package for the Hershey's chocolate bar. Look how primitive it looks. It doesn't look anything like chocolate. The next slide shows something a little bit more next, and a little bit more, but then there's a radiation on the next. Go ahead. All radiation to various forms of Hershey's, and then the final slide on this shows you how many forms they can actually take. Small ones for Halloween, large ones, things that are 8 ounces, 9 ounces, bitter, chocolate, all sorts of radiations will take place. Evolution takes place in our bodies, in every cell. Evolution takes place with Mickey Mouse in cartoons, with our food, and with humanity. Next. So what does all this have to do with cancer, bad genes, or bad luck? Are we done? Is this the end of the story, or is it the beginning? Well, this is a slide taken from Bert Vogelstein's Science publication in 2014. And what it shows is a cartoon of a youngster on the upper left, a cartoon of an adult on the upper right, and the individual black words are the names of different cancers. And next to that, there are numbers that indicate the number of mutations in those individual cancers. Now let me first tell you that whether we are a human, or a gibbon, or a chimpanzee, or for that matter, a dog or a cat, we have 24,000 genes. Now, our genes are not the same as other animals. They're different. They're put together in different ways. There are certain changes within those genes that allow us to identify humanity versus non-humanity. On the other hand, we are 99.2% equal to the chimpanzee. We're very, very close. But we'll show you that there are mutations in genes in the cancers that differ according to each cancer. Next. For breast cancer, on average, there are 33 mutations that take place in 33 different genes. Next. There are 42 mutations in ovarian cancer. Next. In the top are 147 mutations for what is called non-small cell cancer of the lung, and 163 mutations in what is called small cell cancer of the lung. Both of those most commonly associated with tobacco, which causes a lot of mutations, but not always are they the cause. But you can see these are common mutations. Where do these take place? They take place in the driver genes, which are called the oncogenes, or the suppressor genes in the red, or the orange genes, which are the repair genes. That's where these mutations take place. They are regulating the rate of the cell growth. And when they're mutant, they allow these cells to divide and pile up and make a cancer. Next. Now, when we do deep sequencing of cancers, which means we can actually take a small piece of cancer and study it for 24,000 mutations. We can study it. On average, there'll be between 2 and 8 changes that take place over 20 to 30 years. Every time there's a mutation, it permits there to be a piling up of cells, because they are in, you see this here, more cells will be produced than are lost. Similarly, there's about 140 important genes when a mutation takes place that these represent genes that are the critical ones that form cancer. While there are 24,000 genes, only 140 of them are known to drive cancer. And those are the ones divided between the green in the oncogenes, the red in the suppressor genes, and the orange in the regulatory genes. This is important for another thing, another point. Many of you here have heard of the word personalized medicine. Those who have heard that phrase, raise your hands. So I'd say probably 40% have heard it. What that refers to is our ability to identify a gene causing the cancer and to target it with a drug. And invariably, the drugs that we target it with are oral agents that don't cause vomiting and don't cause hair loss. Any of us would sign up for that in a moment. And the next slide shows exactly what that means. That's a tough birthmark, Hal. That's what personalized medicine is. It means finding what's driving the cancer and hitting it right between, in this case, the chest. If it was the back, we'd say the shoulder blades, and knocking it out. Next. This slide is taken directly from the work by Bert Vogelstein and Thomas Setti in Science in 2015. And it referred to the fact that cancers always seem to occur more commonly in the older population. It's uncommon to have a cancer when you're 20 or 30, and more common when you're above 60 or 70. And I would refer again, as I did before, that that's like driving a long-distance road, and you can have accidents at any point along that path. They reasoned that cancers in different organs occur at significantly different rates. For example, the lifetime risk of developing colon cancer is 4.8%. However, the lifetime risk of developing cancer of the small bowel is 0.2%, which is 24 times less common. Why? Food that we eat passes from our stomach to our small bowel to our large bowel. If food is causing it, why would the small bowel be less susceptible than the large bowel? Why is it that many people who smoke get lung cancer, but the overwhelming majority of people who smoke never get lung cancer? There must be something that's protecting them from developing it. Furthermore, chance must be involved. If people can get lung cancer on the right lung, why didn't they get it on the left? Or they get cancer in the right kidney, why didn't they get it in the left? Or the left breast, why didn't they get it on the right? There's chance involved. These organs, the breasts, kidneys, are identical organs under the microscope and in every genetic way. And one would think that there's some degree of chance. And so what Tomasetti and Vogelstein did was they went to the literature to see what was published about so-called stem cells. Now, stem cells are just like a seed that you put in the soil to grow tomatoes or cucumbers or peppers this week. They generate the flower, they generate the vegetative portion of the plant, the stem, the stamen, the ovulin, everything. It generates everything from that seed. The stem cell does the same thing. The stem cell, a normal stem cell, will ultimately make a human being. After all, what is a sperm cell when it joins an ovum? It makes a human being with billions and billions of cells. And every one of those is identical to each other. But they reasoned that those stem cells must divide. And therefore, if an event, meaning a mutation, I showed what a mutation was in that red star, if a mutation takes place every so often, every million or 2 million divisions, then if a stem cell is around for many, many years, it has gone through more divisions. And therefore, there are more opportunities to have a car accident and a crash that leads to a cancer. And therefore, they said certain cancers may be related to the accident of length of existence. On the other hand, there may be cancers that are directly related to things that we eat and smoke or breathe and drink. We would call those environmental cancers, and other cancers that are related to who gave birth to us, what's in our genes, things that we have in the past thought we have very little control over. That's no longer so true. So they reasoned, next slide, that on the bottom in the red, as cells, stem cells, live for a longer period of time from left to right, these cells on the right have undergone more divisions. And on the next slide, the arrow up indicates the increased incidence of cancer. And simply that as cells live for a longer period of time and are subject to division, that there's going to be more cancers on the upper right than on the bottom left for the individual tumors. They then took all of this data and plugged it into a mathematical model in order to reorganize this into the rarity of small bowel cancers, the rarity of esophageal cancers, the rarity of brain cancers, the survival of the, not the fittest, but the numbers of stem cells. And on the next slide, came up with this remarkable diagram, which on the left shows 13 cancers which are strictly related to the numbers of divisions that stem cells have been through and are not related to heredity and not related to what we eat, drink, or breathe in. These cancers, and you'll be able to see them, include duodenal cancer, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, thyroid cancer, that's a relatively common cancer, and even pancreatic cancers are related to that more than what we take in our environment. On the right are cancers that are related more to heredity and more related to what we consume in our environments. Basal cell carcinoma of the skin and melanoma. Obviously, these cancers are related to sun screening at Barnegat Light or on one of the other beautiful beaches in New Jersey. Hepatocellular carcinoma, related to hepatitis C virus because of drug abuse or because of getting a transfusion or other exposures that we may have. Colorectal cancer is related, but there's actually two forms of colorectal cancer. One form of colorectal cancer may be related to a genetic mechanism called FAP, familial adenomatosis polyposis, which is a hereditary mechanism of colon cancer. And another is strictly related, and I'll show you in a minute, strictly related to an abnormality in the repair genes called hereditary non-polyposis colon cancer. Most importantly, on the left are cancers that are related to the length of survival and the number of stem cell divisions, and on the right are those that are related to, more related to heredity and to exposures. Next slide. Now, who can identify who this person is? Angelina Jolie. Many people here have described her as looking like my daughter. Which one? Paulina. Next slide. And this is Angelina. You know that 3 years ago, she had a double mastectomy. And the reason she had that is because she found that she was a BRCA2 carrier for breast and ovarian cancer. She learned that her mother, next slide, had died of ovarian cancer. Next slide. Had died of ovarian cancer. Her mother, Micheline Bertrand, was an actress in France and died of ovarian cancer at a young age. She was actually 54. And Angelina was tested and was found to be a BRCA2 carrier. Subsequently, she heroically had double mastectomy and reconstruction, and this past year had a double oophorectomy, and her fallopian tubes were removed. Because of her, a company called Myriad Genetics lost the patent on their genetic studies. A test that was $5,000 has come down to $1,200, and many companies are doing the test so that many more women can have the genetic studies done and find out if they are carriers. And very shortly, every woman with breast cancer will be having this test when they walk in for a complete blood count. Next slide. Well, this shows in the Vogelstein slide that on average there's 33 mutations in the breast cancers in women who have had breast cancer. 33 genes will be mutant. Next slide. Some of these are driver mutations. Others of them are passenger mutations, meaning they're just going along for the ride and are not contributing to the development of the cancer. Factors for breast cancer include getting older. The average age is now about 61. Having an early onset of a period. Late menopause. Never having children. One of the leading populations with breast cancer are nuns. The use of estrogens, dietary factors with alcohol and fat intake, very minor roles. But the next slide shows you the most important driver, and that is the family history. If a woman develops breast cancer before the age of 50, her daughters, instead of having a lifetime 12% risk of breast cancer, will have a lifetime 19% risk of breast cancer, irrespective of the gene. So we know that there's a very strong transmission risk of developing breast cancer just by having breast cancer at an early age. Next. This slide shows the development of breast cancer in the general population in the orange on the bottom. At the age of 20, the risk of developing breast cancer over the next 10 years is 1 out of 2,000. At the age of 30, the risk of developing breast cancer over the next 10 years is 1 out of 126. At the age of 40, the risk of developing breast cancer over the next 10 years is 1 out of 56. At the age of 50, it drops to 1 out of 26. At the age of 60, 1 out of 16. At the age of 70, 1 out of 8 over the next 10 years. And the lifetime risk is between 12 and 13%. On the other hand, if one is a carrier of BRCA1, you can see the marked elevation and shift to the left of this onset curve, so that at age 40, already 20% of women have breast cancer. At age 50, it's up to 60%. Now, the newest data shows that for a BRCA1 carrier, the lifetime risk currently is running between 38 and 75%. It's dropping a little bit because the original studies were done on enriched families. I don't mean wealthy families. I mean families that had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people with breast cancer, enriched by breast cancer so that they could identify the gene, the genetic driver on chromosome 17 in 1994. And 3 years later, it was discovered that the BRCA2 gene was on chromosome 13. And I have 2 people with a BRCA1 and a BRCA2 mutation. And this drives up the risk of breast cancer and other cancers that I'll show you in a moment. But that's why this is so important. These are classical driver mutations. This is hereditary. This is not accidental. This is not bad luck. This is a bad gene. Next slide. The 2 genes on the left, BRCA1 and BRCA2, are hotspots, and that's why I have them in red. But there are 14 genes on the right that I can now study because these account for another 25% of hereditary breast cancer that we are now able to measure specifically because of Angelina Jolie's work. And I've got women with, I don't have women with mutations in the 14, but of the 14, I've got women with a mutation in 1 or more of 7 of those genes. And they work through different mechanisms. When these genes are mutant, there's a failure of DNA repair. The cells may not be controlled properly. They don't undergo what's called cell cycle arrest. Or the cells may forget how to die. Remember, cell death is part of us. When we peel our mouth from hot soup during a Passover Seder or some other event, or when we have viral gastroenteritis or sunburn, we lose cells. Cells die naturally. In cancer, they may forget how to die. BRCA1, BRCA2 tell cells not to die. And the same thing with those other mutations, cells, the other genes on the right, in which mutations may take place. Next slide. In women, these are the malignancies can take place. Breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and there's a risk in men of prostate cancer, although uncommon, and malignant melanoma in 8% of instances. The next slide shows the risk in BRCA2 on chromosome 13. It's a similar risk for breast. Many people think it might be 5 or 10% less. It's a definitely lower risk for ovarian. The number is now between 11 and 17% lifetime. However, many more organs may be affected. Men have an 8% lifetime risk of prostate cancer with this gene, but they occur at age 40, 45, not age 60, which is the more common age, and they're more serious prostate cancers, pancreas cancer. Instead of a lifetime risk of 2 to 3%, it can be twice that. Interestingly enough, they're more favorable prostate cancer, pancreas cancers. Malignant melanoma, about an 8 to 10% risk. They too may be more favorable when they occur with BRCA2 mutations. Laryngeal cancers may occur, and other head and necks, and remarkably, even cancer of the eye called ocular melanoma, and I have 2 people with that. Next slide. So there's more disorders. In BRCA1, breast and ovarian, early age of onset, BRCA2, many other cancers, a little later age of onset, and a little lesser frequency. this shows that in colon cancer, on average, there's 66 mutations. Again, I said we have 24,000 genes. 140 of those are important in developing cancers. 66 of them can be mutant in colon cancer. And these may occur in the driver genes that are oncogenes, suppressor genes, or repair genes. Next slide. Shows us what is actually a Vogelgram. In 1988, Bert Vogelstein at Johns Hopkins found that there was a series of mutations that would take place that would lead normal bowel tissue, normal intestinal tissue, to develop a polyp, and then an anaplastic polyp, and then a highly anaplastic and invasive polyp, and then an invasive malignancy spreading to lymph nodes. That's normal tissue, dysplastic, early adenomas, which means polyp, and then carcinoma and spread. Diagrammatically, that's what these are. They're growing deeper and ultimately spreading into lymph nodes. And so these mutations actually take place going from left to right. The mutations accumulate. And as they accumulate, the benign polyp becomes an invasive polyp, an invasive mutated malignancy with many new features. Remember, it undergoes Darwinian evolution, and it can travel to other parts of the body as it acquires new features and new characteristics. Next slide. I will display for you one of my families, one of a family that I take care of at this time. Round circles refers to women. Square boxes refers to men. A line through the circular square means that person died. Wherever you see red, how many reds do you see? 6. That means colon cancer. This particular population represents 4 brothers and sisters. 2 sisters, 2 brothers. All 4 of them had colon cancer. Age 36, age 45, age 43, age 42, colon cancer. They're brothers and sisters. Their mother had stomach cancer at age 48 and died. Their uncle had colon cancer at age 58 and survived. Their aunt had uterine cancer, age 19. Uterine cancer. It's kind of like the story from Johns Hopkins. Uterine cancer. Well, this family has an inherited mutation, bad gene, called an MSH2 mutation. This is a very devout family. There are 3 Baptist ministers in the family. They're lovely, lovely people, highly educated, and I take care of 3 members of the family now. Mainly, the children of this woman. She's now 56. She's fine. She's had 2 cancers, and she has 3 children, 2 of whom are carriers of the gene. Next slide. This is known as hereditary non-polyposis colon cancer. It's an abnormality in the repair genes that I told you, next slide, is so important, next slide, for, again, and again, providing the DNA repair when there's an abnormality in the oncogenes or an abnormality in the suppressor genes, which are driving the cancer. It's got to repair those genes. And if the repair genes themselves, are not working, the other genes don't get repaired. I think of it this way. I have a garden. I wear jeans when I work in the garden to plant seeds or the stem cells. And my jeans get dirty around the knees. I bring them in and I stick them in my Maytag washing machine. It's fine, gets them cleaned. My jeans get cleaned. They get cleaned up. But I come home one day and Marlene tells me the washing machine is not working. We call up the repairman. He's out with the flu. He's got the flu. The repairman, the repair genes are abnormal. The repairman is sick. If the repairman is sick, my genes don't get cleaned. My genes don't get repaired. And they're going to look dirty and I can't go to work tomorrow. And that's what this is all about. Those repair genes need to do the work of cleaning genes, whether it's spelled with a G or with a J. Next slide. And when that happens, the rate of the cell cycle turns up rapidly. So instead of developing cancer at age 60 or at age 70, we get cancer at age 19, uterine cancer, or colon cancer at age 36. Right now I have a 28-year-old from India. That's called a turning on of tumor progression. Next slide. And these are regulatory genes. They modify the activity of other genes, and they correct abnormalities, and they removed damaged DNA and fix it so the normal regulation is restored. Next. Well, this is a mismatch of socks. Now, people here know I like socks. And the newest thing out, by the way, is to wear mismatches. So I'm going to be doing that soon. I didn't do it tonight, but you can take a look. But mismatches, this is what is repaired by these genes. Next slide. So the cancers in this instance, when they occur in the bowel, occur on the right side of the bowel. They occur in young people. They may occur multiply, and they may occur in family members who are young as well. It's the law of threes. 3 or more members of a family, any 2 of whom are related to one another by first degree, meaning mother, father, brother, sister. Any 1 of whom is younger than 50. The law of threes, we think of this. Next. But the next slide. These cancers occur at a very early age. This is normal onset of colon cancer. This is early onset colon cancer. Exactly what we saw for the BRCA1 situation. Next. And these are other cancers that occur. There's an 80% lifetime risk of colon cancer, but endometrial cancer, that's uterine, 43%. And I showed you that 19-year-old girl. Stomach cancer, 19%. Bile duct, that includes the pancreas, the gallbladder, up to 18%. And even the urinary tract. I do not mean the bladder, by the way. So anybody who's had bladder, no. But I do mean the tube that connects the bladder to the outside, which is the urethra, and the tube that connects the kidney to the bladder, which is the ureter. Cancers there are commonly this. And anybody with that should be studied for this. And ovarian. And many of us think that breasts are associated with this as well. Next slide. So, the emperor of all maladies is, what's the answer to the question? Is it bad genes, or is it bad luck, or is it really both? And it's really a matter of perspective. We all do things in our lives that we think maybe we could have done better. Maybe we shouldn't have done. Some people here might be smokers even though they've had lung cancer. What are you going to do about it? It's not easy to stop. You're not going to berate somebody. What I tell them is, you know what? You had lung cancer. It looks like you were cured. Let's do the best you can. Modify your lifestyle in other ways to try to protect yourself from other cancers or from another lung cancer. Some people misinterpreted the bad luck thought from Dr. Vogelstein, thinking that if cancers were due to bad luck, I'll just go on smoking. I'll just go on overeating and other things like that. That's not what was meant at all. All what was meant is that the variability of cancers within families, the variability in cancers among populations of people is largely a matter of the luck of the draw, the roll of the dice, or the draw of the card. that there's variability in those people who develop cancers. But there's also much less variability in cancers that are related to environmental factors. Heavy smokers are more likely to get cancer, even though most don't. Heavy people are more likely to get promyelocytic leukemia or stomach cancer, even though most don't. So the point is that all of us can modify our factors to exercise. Do you know that exercising for 40 minutes, 3 times per week, lowers the risk of a recurrence of breast cancer or even the development of breast cancer, lowers the risk for colon cancer or a relapse of colon cancer by the same amount of reduction that chemotherapy provides? 20%. It's amazing. But people don't register that. It's never too late to modify a risk factor. Do you know that decreasing your fat content in your diet so that it incorporates less than 20% of your total daily caloric intake lowers your risk of breast cancer, rectal cancer, colon cancer, stomach cancer by between 20 and 30%. These are dramatic changes by very minor modifications and re-education. Aspirin, 81 milligrams a day, lowers the risk for pancreas, esophageal, stomach, breast, rectal, penile, bladder. It's 81 milligrams. Some of you are on it because of cardiac reasons. Next slide. Well, does anybody know who painted this? I will give you a clue that it was 1883 and the painter was 10 years old. Nobody? Picasso. He was 10 years old. And in 1904, the next painting, Mademoiselle d'Avignon, can I have the next one, please? Mademoiselle d'Avignon was the very first recognized cubistic painting, again by Picasso in 1904, Mademoiselle d'Avignon. These are prostitutes, by the way. Not that it has anything to do with what we're talking about tonight, but it just brings us back to, I guess, Belgium again and to Amsterdam. But the point of the matter, the reason I show these two is because just like painting has different perspectives 10 years apart. The first painting, the guy was 10 years old. The next one, he's 21 years old. Completely different perspective. The same thing is happening with our perspectives on cancer. There are enormous things that we can do. We can prevent cancer. We can cure most cancers. We are overcoming cancers at every level, whether it's chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, makes no difference to me. We're breaking it down at every level. And the immune therapies that's unleashing and providing a harness of our own immune system to kill cancers is miraculous. I'm personally living in a time where every day I almost regret, I do regret, starting out too long ago. I remember every day people who died under my care 25 and 30 years ago who today would be living. Fortunately, some people in this audience today are alive despite my inadequate care from 30 years ago. I thank you for having me. I hope that's been educational. I thank the program for inviting me.